Hi, this is Pat McDonald, your host for Vote for Vermont, where our tagline is Listening Beyond the Soundbites. Ben Kinsley is here this evening. He's co-host, co-producer, and sponsor. Do you want to do a little...
Sure.
A little thing?
a little song and dance?
A little something, yes.
Yeah, so I have a consulting firm called Imperium Advisors, and really the core of our value add is doing public policy research and development, but that's spun off into a number of other things, including advocacy work, lobbying, communications development and planning, social media placements, a whole bunch of different things that have kind of come out of that core thing. And, you know, Vermont, you kind of have to be a jack of all trades.
Exactly.
So,
diversify. Diversification.
Exactly.
Thank you very much. And our guest this evening is Gail Graham, who is a dear friend in all honesty here. And I was having lunch with her the other day after knowing her for so many years. We all share personal stuff and gossip. Right, good gossip.
Oh, we're in the right town for that.
That is, exactly, Montpelier. Anyway, she told me that she was a nurse for 10 months on the SS Hope. I'm sure some of you are going, what is that? And Gail's going to explain it to us. But she was on the ship, which was a medical ship, hospital ship, actually. It had surgery and... it was actually back when it was a ship from the Navy that was made into a hospital ship. And I was blown away by the fact that my friend had actually done this, because when I grew up, it was just the biggest thing to talk about, where the SS Hope was docking, was going. So Gail, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
That introduction, I don't think I've ever introduced anybody that long. But could you tell us a little bit about your background and how you came to volunteer on the SS Hope? That's a great honor, wasn't it?
Thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome.
My name is Gail Graham, and I was born and raised here and grew up in Calais. And I went to nursing school in Hanover, New Hampshire, when it was still Mary Hitchcock School, which is now Dartmouth Hitchcock. Right. I'm very proud to say that. And I also took a course in operating room nursing, so that became my focus. And then I moved to California and lived in various places. I was living in Newport Beach when this came about.
Great. So they approached you and asked you.
Well, I'll tell you the story of what happened.
Right.
I was working as a surgical nurse at Hoag Hospital in Newport Beach, California. I was in the Newport Beach in the 60s. It was terrible. No, I'm kidding.
That was a place to be, though.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Oh, yeah.
It was a place to be.
Poor baby, as they say.
Yeah.
And as I say, I was a surgical nurse, and so I was on call, and we had to do a C-section at around midnight one night, and the obstetrician was about to leave for Nicaragua to volunteer on the ship Hope. And so we're closing, it's, you know, casual time, and he said, "Say, Gail, you like to travel? You should look into this." I said, "Okay." I said, "While you're there," I said, "I want you to get all the details, you know." So about 2 months later, I happened to be on the hallway in the operating room one day, and Dr. Thompson opened up the doors and said, "Where's Gail?" Here I am. He said, "You're going."
Wow.
And so, you know, what have I got myself into? So with his prompting, support and everything, I applied.
Great. Now you went for 10 months, and you just said he went for 2. And the research I've done sound like some people go for 2, for 6. So you have a choice of how long you want to volunteer.
The
right?
Ones like the nurses and all of the personnel that, you know, staff in the hospital, we were signed up for 10 months.
Oh, I see.
The doctors actually volunteered 2 months of their time, so it was kind of a different situation.
Right.
But
so they
act-
only stayed 2 months and then they rotated out.
because it was difficult for them. They had to leave, pardon me, leave their practice.
Right.
And so yeah.
And face some things I bet they've never faced before.
Yeah, some diseases you probably don't
right.
have to deal
Well, that's
with.
that's
you
what
know.
they say that you watched and learned for once or twice, and then you're on your own to deal with it.
Yeah.
So.
So how big of a ship are we talking about? Like, how big is this ship?
Let's see, how many football fields long was it?
Yeah,
Oh, we're
it's
measuring
huge.
football fields, huh?
Yeah, I'm not good at measurements and everything,
Well,
but
This was a U.S. naval ship.
Yes.
And this guy took it over and changed it into, and it's the USS Consolation. So it's a big Navy ship.
yes, it was built at the end of World War II in
Yep.
Long Beach shipyards, and when it was completed, the war ended, and so this Consolation was in mothballs, so to speak.
Right.
I'm going to give you a little background on Dr. Walsh, how it started.
Well, I was hoping we could see the video first.
Okay.
And maybe you can explain the video to us and I hope you stay and watch it. It's about 5 minutes long, and it'll give you a perspective of what we're talking about.
Yes, very well.
Yeah, so why don't you just set it up for us and tell folks what we're going to see.
What you're going to see in the video?
In the video.
Basically, the operation of the ship, you're going to see the ship itself. But when I watched this the other day, it's very well done. I mean, it was done a while ago, a long time ago.
Yeah.
Because I think it was the Indonesia trip, which was the first one.
Yeah.
But it's the basics. I mean, it shows you the patient rooms and some of the patients
Right.
and the operating rooms. And basically, I thought it was well done in showing.
It is funny you say it's older, because you know how the people way back when in movies, they kind of they kind of move a little stilted a little bit
Right.
from when it's almost like a silent movie sort of thing. It's black and white, but I think it'll give you a good perspective of what we're talking about here, particularly if you don't even know what we're discussing here. I've seen the ship, and I'm this old, but I've seen the ship, and I've heard the stories of it over the years. So anyway, if we could roll that, we'll be right back.
Brought up in Asia and knew firsthand how much the people needed medical help. But whatever her background, every nurse on board was determined Project Hope would be a success. As for the doctors, well, a lot of us saw duty in World War II. More than half of us in the Pacific. We saw a lot and learned a lot in those years. And we discovered there was a whole field of medicine that American doctors knew little about. Before we took off, Project Hope's architects tried to make the ship self-sufficient in every way. The system for making milk and drinking water is one of the most amazing processes I've ever seen. Imagine making milk from seawater. Every day, thousands of gallons of salt water from the Pacific Ocean are pumped into the ship. Then the big tanks boil the water, and the salt is taken out. After filtering the water over and over, pure milk solids are added. Then butterfat is blended. The result? Milk that tastes just like something straight from a dairy at home. On a rainy morning in October, we arrived at our first port of call, Jakarta, Indonesia's capital. Now, all of us on board would have a chance to test our skills and dreams against the realities of a foreign land and people. Our first visitors were ambassadors from the many different countries represented in Indonesia. Even the ambassador from the Soviet Union toured the ship. Indonesian political leaders, doctors, and their wives came aboard to inspect us too. They could see that the SS Hope was a floating medical center, ready for business, and not a hollow propaganda boast. For me, and for every doctor and nurse on board, there'll be an Indonesian counterpart who's been trained in the same branch of medicine, Indonesians who will leave their homes and their jobs to work side by side with Americans. I was assigned to work with Dr. Noor, a young internist who led his class at the Central Indonesian Medical University.
Working side by side with the Americans, we Indonesians admit the patients. In the beginning, we do not know this child's name, nor his village, nor his family. He is only a number on our records. For many of our patients, the ship seems a gift from God. Some come from the crowded cities, some from distant jungle villages. All are gravely ill, afraid they will never see their homes or families again. The ship and the Americans seem very strange at first. Pain and fear are companions for all the sick people we take on board. Soon after the first patients are admitted, we have a most distinguished visitor, the leader of our country, President Sukarno. He is especially interested in the main lecture room where through closed-circuit television, doctors and students learn how various operations are performed.
As time goes on, other specialists will join the ship to help Project Hope bring the latest medical information and techniques to other countries. The operating rooms are in constant use, morning to night. On a typical day, we have a cystolithiasis in operating room 1 at 8:30 and a Swanson operation in room 2 at the same time. At 10 o'clock, there's a splenectomy in room 1 and the excision of a renal cyst in room 2. Operation follows operation. But they represent far more than just the treatment of the sick. Every doctor knows that when a surgeon has seen a special operation done once or twice, he learns how to do it himself. And that's what counts. These Indonesian surgeons will be able to go on from here now, do the operations themselves, and most important, be able to teach others too. Eventually, we found out that our little orphan's name was Sana. The surgery on his tumor lasted more than 6.5 hours. Our television cameras piped the delicate operation into the lecture room on closed-circuit TV for the students and observers, teaching so that the knowledge of one man, one doctor, one surgeon, one nurse can become the knowledge of thousands. This is the basic purpose of Project Hope. After the operation, little Sana was puzzled about the missing growth on his neck. But he managed to eat well. And there were always playmates wanting to visit him. The surgeon and intensive care nurse watched over him closely. The result? Well, for the first time in his young life, little Sana, unknown, unwanted when he came aboard, can hold his head erect.
So that was pretty cool. I know I learned a whole lot from that.
Yeah, that's great.
Gail, I'm sure this brings back memories for you, being on the ship and seeing the ship and the kids and what were some of the highlights for you being on the SS Hope?
I'm hesitating because there were so many, and I've been trying to, think about all of this. I'm glad you saw the video because it depicts a lot of the basics of it. As I say, before we got to Cartagena, we were told that, people from all outlying areas came. They knew the big white ship was coming, and that maybe it could help them. And you saw the picture of the boy with the large tumor.
Right.
That's kind of thing is fairly common in third world countries.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And of course, where most of these people lived outside of Cartagena, they didn't have the resources. There was nothing that they could do for them. Mm-hmm. And maybe they weren't able to get to the big hospital. But that kind of thing, keep in mind, like malnutrition was a big one, and this is the one that I keep remembering. It was very common, particularly little kids. They got the
big belly.
The big belly, the bloated belly. I mean, that became very common. I mean, when we would see these, we'd know what the cause was. And of course, we don't see that in our country for the most part. Mm. But it was, and this was the basis of a lot of their health issues. Their diet was bad, and that's
very limited.
Yeah, their water was probably bad.
The water was bad, but they ate many of the wrong things. Like it tended to be what was available to them, and a lot of it contained a lot of sugar.
Right.
But the basic thing was lacking in protein, and the good things that we have, and that's why the result with the malnutrition.
Well, and we saw the iron cow on the ship, right? And that's the source of protein. They said that one of the biggest things they did with that was they handed out the milk cartons.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. I was telling you earlier, when we first arrived in Cartagena, the iron cow was broken. And it took a while to get it fixed. And so we weren't getting milk or anything, but they finally got it fixed, and it was wonderful when they finally did, because we would take turns. We'd go out and with the trucks and everything, and hand out these little cartons of milk.
That's great.
And they were so gracious.
Could I ask you, the doctors and nurses in the hospitals, were they at a reasonable level of expertise and talent? And because I noticed a lot of the health professionals came to all the lectures on the ship, correct? Were they at a pretty decent level of expertise, or lacking?
Yes, they were, Pat. A fair number of them, at least in Cartagena, had come to the United States to do some residency.
Oh, great.
And their thing when they did that was to go back to their country,
right,
and teach their.
So for the most part, treatment probably depended on whether you had money or not. Bingo.
Good point. Good
So
point.
the people that we saw just came from out of the city, and probably, or in the city, just didn't have any money to get the treatment.
From the hospital.
From the hospital, right.
Yeah.
They didn't, and this was another thing that we dealt with, was that we dealt directly with the University of Cartagena hospital, big hospital. But they mostly treated the people with money.
For sure.
And this is why
Sounds familiar?
the ones that we treat, as I say,
Right.
particularly outlying, but even in Cartagena, I mean, the poverty. I mean, we on occasion go out into the barrios.
Yeah, right.
And I mean, usually huts with dirt floors.
Right. Oh, so you would not only be on the ship, but you'd go out and treat out in the fields? And,
sometimes.
wow.
I can tell you one. You can. Of course, it was a very Catholic, culture
Country,
down there, and so they were very against any type of birth control.
Right.
And we learned that before we arrived, one of the obstetricians, gynecologists, had been trying to have basic classes with women. Number one, explaining to them how they got pregnant. Honest.
That's
difficult.
basic.
Yeah, well, you can't really have a conversation about birth control without talking about how that happens.
Well, they probably didn't. Who taught them?
Yeah.
Nobody.
I mean, it's,
Basic.
Yeah, but they didn't, because, I mean, these are the patients. They're not educated.
Sure.
Yeah. And
Their mothers probably didn't even know. Nobody knew, so they didn't teach them.
Yeah, exactly. And you went out to a clinic one day, and I helped while they inserted IUDs.
Yeah.
God only knows. We had wonderful administrators. I still to this day think, how did we get away with doing that? But we did. But what I remember is when that woman got off that table, she had a big smile on her face because she knew she wasn't going to get pregnant again.
Right.
And
Right.
I mean, this is very basic.
Well, you have no money to feed the children you have, and or yourself, and they just keep coming.
No,
So,
exactly.
not
And
good.
of course, the mortality rate amongst
bet.
infants, newborns and infants, was very high.
I read in some of the videos that I was looking at, it looked like almost a win-win for our doctors, because they were talking about they don't have a lot of experience with tropical diseases. So when we went there, the doctors there taught us about, well, there was some malaria and stuff, just in case it came to the United States and they had to do something about it. So we taught them, they taught us. So it was really
just in
a
case,
win-win.
there's a rise in people not vaccinating themselves, and
Exactly.
and then some of these diseases we killed 50 years ago
Yeah,
come
back. Well, they are now in
Yeah.
California.
They are now,
They are.
yeah.
Well, everywhere.
Poverty.
Vaguely recall, I can't remember the details, but vaguely recall discussions about leprosy.
Ooh,
But I cannot, I've been trying to remember all the details. Of course, we didn't deal with them.
that is one scary disease.
But if I recall it correctly, I think they did have an area for them.
Oh, on the ship.
No, in the country.
Oh, in the country.
in the country.
Oh, right.
Oh, like a quarantine
Yeah.
area type of thing, or
Well,
I think lepers were usually
yeah,
put
I think.
in a
away.
compound.
Yeah,
or
I
something,
think,
so-
and of course, we know about it, but don't deal with it. But that's why I just vaguely recall that they did have an area where they kept them, because we didn't deal with them.
Well-
Yeah, our big thing, of course, we had to take medication
I was just
weekly
gonna
or
ask you, you
whatever
must
for
have had a few-
malaria.
Yeah. Oh, just malaria?
That was the main thing,
Yeah.
I recall. Yeah, of course, we had to have shots and everything before we went.
What I thought was cool is that HOPE actually stands for something. And do you know what that is? Or because I've cheated, I've written it down. But
No, you're right. Health opportunities for people everywhere.
that is so cool.
Just cool.
And that's what they did. Cartagena was just one stop that this ship did. It went all over.
We were, I think, the 9th tour. And the other part of the motto was helping people help themselves.
Right.
right.
Well,
And this is one thing that I still talk about when I have the occasion, in that it's all well and good to send money to countries,
yeah, if they get it.
but we have no guarantee of how it's going to be spent.
right.
Like we observed down there what happened with some of the things that we sent down there.
Right.
But it was, and this was our thing, was helping people help themselves.
Great.
And fortunately, in Cartagena, we had a very, very good experience in Cartagena.
That's great. That's great.
Dealing with the people. Not all tours were that great because there was resistance in some countries.
I'm sure they didn't want to
And-
look bad to their people. And the Americans, for heaven's sake, right?
Well, there was resistance. We had one group, we were warned about this. We had meetings, and there was just one small group of medical students that were adverse towards us.
Really? For what possible reason they could learn?
Well, I have a different philosophy. Their philosophy wasn't free enterprise and all that kind of thing. If you know.
Butting in and we can do it ourselves?
Yeah,
That's
they're
too bad. Looking at some of those people, I don't think they did a really good job. That child with a tumor, I thought it was a goiter, but a tumor,
yeah.
that's just, I mean, the kid can't move, can't do
Yeah,
anything.
well, that was probably more of an access to healthcare thing. Like his
Yeah, right,
parents
the
couldn't
money.
afford to send
Right.
him to the hospital.
Right.
And
See, there was a huge difference. I mean, class. I mean, they're
Class
when we were
people.
there. They're very, very rich.
And
They're
the
very, very poor.
not. Yeah.
But what a lot of the people were doing was trying to bring in the middle class. Like, for instance, some of the women were like going out and having jobs and earning money so that they would be able to send their kids to school, kind of thing.
Right.
And they were trying to bring in more of that middle class instead of the diversion.
Right.
The really separate, upper class and then the poor.
It was very evident, and it was a challenge for us to deal with, really, because
Now you did the surgical nurse role. I mean, you were in the surgery in the operating rooms, because that was your strength.
yes, yeah, that was
How many operating rooms do they
I
have?
think
They had
5.
3 operating rooms on the ship.
Yeah.
That's great.
That's
Yeah.
pretty impressive to have 3 operating rooms on a ship, like fully
And I'm sure they
functional.
were just all busy, just
Oh
rotating
yeah,
around.
we were. Yeah. We worked 6.5 days a week.
You must have worked on things you've never seen before.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Or since.
Since, thank God.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, one of them, so one of the things I'll bring in, we all had counterparts. We were assigned, even the doctors. Like, my counterpart was a woman that was in charge of surgery at the maternity hospital. The maternity hospital, Maternidad, was separate from the university hospital. It was part of it, but physically
Yeah.
separate. So this woman was my counterpart, and she came on the ship and worked with me and everything. Remind me, I'll tell you about learning Spanish. And then the last 3 months we were there, I was at Maternidad
Oh, wow.
instead of on the ship.
Oh, that's cool.
Nice. You probably saw
was-
some different things than we do here, huh? As she's face goes, whoa. Was it pretty much similar to what maternity is here? I mean, there's not much you can do when the baby wants to be born, but they must have had different practices and stuff.
It was
Ruh-roh.
something else. It's hard to describe, but just the setting itself, I had to adjust to. Like, for instance, supplies.
Oh,
In Spanish, it's no hay. We don't have any.
right.
I kept hearing that.
Oh, I know.
And like the autoclave was not working. This is a Maternidad on the
Right.
shore. So we had to sterilize instruments and things in a pressure cooker.
Wow.
And
All right.
they had no supplies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We had to patch gloves, rubber gloves. I never learned how to patch rubber gloves.
Throw 'em
I
out.
learned
Right.
because we didn't have them.
Wow.
Boyle reused sponges and sutures.
Good grief.
Wow.
And what I used to do, I had my little satchel I would take, and I would go down to our central supply on the ship and take items like catheters, whatever they had,
Yeah.
that we wouldn't use again, but they were much better. So
Yeah.
I kind of snuck them over to the Maternidad, another thing is, I didn't want them to know, because it got to the point where they were expecting us to leave
Right.
everything but the ship.
Right.
By the time we left, we had not much left on the ship because
bet.
it kind of had
Right.
gone.
Well, after you've seen that, how can you possibly not? I mean, you just have
Well,
to.
the other thing is of culture, and this is one of the many things we had to learn, was how does their impression of the United States?
Right.
Movies,
Yeah.
what they mainly would see is we're wealthy,
Right.
and they had no idea what it took for us to run this ship.
Right.
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 And
To volunteer like you did for 10 months.
yes, but this was part of our thing, and this is why with 10 months, like it took us 2 months to really get establish the rapport.
Right.
I felt badly for the doctors that
They
were
never
on the
got
first
that.
tour, because it was kind of a little bit discouraging to them sometimes, because they didn't feel that we were gaining anything.
Yeah.
But that you had to do that groundwork first, and then.
Because you took the ship from the United States to Cartagena.
Correct.
Did they use that time to do mock practice so that everybody figured out how to work well with each other, or they didn't? I was thinking about that. I mean, how do you go there and they open up the operating room and bam, you're in there?
Well,
How-
you know what we had to do on the way down?
What?
We had to clean it,
Oh,
because between tours, the ship would go into mothballs,
Right,
not mothballs, but into port, and you know, doing structural work on it and everything, and so it was dirty.
great.
So that was the thing that we had to get things ship shape and
Yep.
together and everything. I was before I left on the voyage, some of my friends in California said, have you ever sailed before, Gail? And I went, no. And they'd start laughing.
Yeah,
And I
right.
went, well, it's always the first
You're
time.
in,
right.
you're in for a treat.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I learned, and so I was taking Dramamine, and I soon found out that I couldn't take Dramamine because I get downstairs to go to work, and I was like,
Oh,
Yeah.
sleeping, sure.
Yeah.
Right.
but no, it was all part of it. No, it was kind of, those of us that went were, you know, experienced in what we did. For me, the language thing, see, they had been in Nicaragua the year before, and so there was 2/3 of the staff on the ship were returning.
Oh.
There were only 2 of us operating room nurses that were new.
Oh, wow.
And that's why I didn't know if I was going to be able to go or not. But so co-workers, and they'd been in other countries, some
Right.
of them spoke Spanish
Oh.
very
And
well.
English,
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
And so these, the people we were working with would start speaking in Spanish to us, and they'd go to the others and say, "Who are those stupid ones over there?" So they'd have to
They'll speak
explain to them
Spanish.
that they're new, they don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
And in Spanish, más despacio, slower, slower. And of course, they speak 2 words slow, and then they go, "Boo."
Right.
Yeah, well,
right.
Spanish is not a slow language.
No, it's not.
I know I'm segueing here, but
No, that's okay. That's great.
So let's talk a little bit about the ship and the mission and how it came about. The ship was founded in 1958 by Dr. William Walsh, who worked with President Eisenhower in order to charter it as the first U.S. Or as a U.S. Navy hospital ship. Or it was originally a U.S. Navy hospital ship that got turned into the SS Hope. So where did the funding for all of this come from? Was this a U.S. government project? Was this
No.
a U.S. aid project? Was it like
no,
how did this happen?
Totally private enterprise.
Totally private.
Totally private enterprise. And I want to give you a little background about Dr. Walsh, who was an absolutely fabulous person. He was a cardiologist in Washington, D.C., and he had been in World War II and in, I can't remember what countries, but was aware of all the poverty and everything. And so that he started thinking about the concept. So he went to President Eisenhower and said, you know, and so President Eisenhower said sure, and so they leased the ship for I think it was $1 a year, so it was on a legitimate basis. But I was following up on that he started with one major donor, it was $150, but then got the corporations and everything. But of course, I wasn't part of it then. But it took a lot, and ultimately, I mean, even now, like I'm a donor, yearly donor, and a lot of working with corporations and like the medical companies.
Mm-hmm.
And
would like donate stuff? Or
yes, there were
materials?
items that couldn't be sold to hospitals in the United States because they might be not outdated, but they just couldn't.
Right.
But for the hospital ship, I mean, it was wonderful. I mean, there was nothing wrong with the items.
Just a little
It was
outdated,
just
but they worked.
Yeah, and it was donating, and of course, it was good for the corporations, the companies,
Right.
because it was a
Because growing up back then, we all knew about the SS Hope. I mean, they would put it be on the radio and they'd cover it, and so you knew what corporations. I don't remember anything now, but you knew then what was backing it.
Yeah.
And now you said you worked for one of the ship lines. How did that get involved?
Well, the logistics of it, the Grace Lines, ship lines, ran the ship, and that is business-wise.
Right.
Okay, and as far as like the engineers, captain,
right,
all of that, and also when I was looking through things, we had to, when we got to Philadelphia, we had to go get our maritime card.
Oh.
We had to, because we were going to be sailing on the ship.
Yeah.
We had to have a maritime card, but yeah. But the Grace Line ran the ship.
Yeah.
That end of the running the
Right.
ship itself, the structure, and then we were.
My grandfather worked for Grace Lines. Too bad he wasn't here. I'd ask him. He worked for them for years.
There's a lot involved with keeping
Yeah,
a ship floating,
for
believe it
sure.
or not.
Yeah,
But I said you worked for them. You worked for no pay, right?
I think we got $1 a day.
Excellent.
We,
And a pension plan, right? With it? Right.
of course, we got our room and board,
Right.
and $1 a day, as I recall correctly. But interestingly, I know I'm segueing again, but
That's okay.
I had initially thought about the Peace Corps before this came up, and I had decided against it. Basically, I read about it and everything, and it just didn't seem like it was the right thing for me.
Right.
When we got to Cartagena, there were Peace Corps people in Cartagena. I think they had been there in Colombia for 2 years.
Ooh.
And it was so difficult for them. See, we had the whole structure
Right.
from administration, down to housekeeping.
Right.
And so we had backing. Like, for instance, when I was at the Maternidad, if I ran into a problem that I just couldn't solve, I had backup from
Right.
administration or the director of nursing or any of that. And so, and I'm not putting down Peace Corps. It was wonderful.
No, it's a
We
great-
got to know
great group.
some there, but I could imagine how frustrated
They
they
didn't
were.
have much backup.
No.
They didn't.
Yeah, you're on
they
your
didn't.
own.
They were on their own.
Yeah.
And I mean, as I say, we just had the whole.
Yeah. Now, the ships operated till 1974 when the decision by Project Hope was not to go set up operations physically on land, right? Not on the ships.
Yes, and I
so
was-
they're all over here. I think they have quite a few locations. What did you think about that change from sea to
Well,
land?
first of all, I'll explain. I was thinking about it further. For one thing, the hospital ship had gotten in disrepair. I don't
Yeah,
think
I'm
it
sure.
could have taken another sail.
Yeah.
You know.
We'd
Yeah,
be dragging it off the bottom of the ocean.
Exactly.
But the other part of it that I am now recalling is that when they were in port, like let's say in Philadelphia, or if they were on the West Coast, the cost of the fees for
Oh,
docking were
yeah, enormous.
going up,
Right.
up and up and up, and
Right.
and the scope of things that was another part of the decision to give up the ship.
Huh.
Instead of trying to renovate the ship or get another ship.
Yeah.
But that was the economics of it.
So do you think the change to land benefited Project Hope? Because they've continued to this day, but
Well-
I must say I've not heard of them.
Right, because you don't have like your
Well, you don't have
flagship.
down the street. Yeah, for sure. You don't have something so spectacular to look at.
I have mixed feelings about that. and I thought a lot about it at the time. I think they're able to go all over the world.
Right.
Okay, but for me, I was just explaining how we had that whole structure. We had the ship, we had
We don't have it there.
the operating rooms, the patient beds, all of that, and which was very, very helpful in teaching. See, a great part of this was teaching.
Right.
So it's just a whole different concept, but it's worked very well. Of course, I keep in touch with a lot of it that's going on.
You said they have reunions too, which
Pardon?
they have reunions, right?
Yes.
That would be wonderful to
Yes,
go to after seeing this.
I've been to a few. I maybe our last one. It was November 1st in San Francisco, and I really, really wanted to go, but for various reasons, I just. And of course, now at Christmas time, I'm hearing from someone saying, "Oh, I went to the reunion." But,
What great
Yeah.
memories.
Yeah.
there's some
That's
of us
pretty cool.
still around.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great.
So looking at the website, Project Hope still focuses on things like disasters, natural disasters, health crises, infectious disease outbreaks, non-communicable diseases, neonatal and child health, and health policy. Those are
Right.
kind of all things that
Yeah.
sounds like some of those are expanded even from the original mission.
Yeah, I think the emergency response sounded like a new thing. If I
Yes,
if
it
I
is. It
read
is.
it correctly.
First of all, I'll explain. Neonatal is one of the big ones, but infectious diseases and everything.
Yeah.
But I like to talk about what currently is going on, and they're down in Colombia taking care of refugees from Venezuela.
Oh, right.
The ones that are so in that part of Colombia that borders Venezuela, and they're
And Venezuela is really
Oh, it's horrible.
they're
Horrible.
not only sort of like going through an economic collapse right
Yep.
now because of the changing oil market. They're also going through basically a full society collapse.
For sure.
Like family structures are collapsing.
People are starving. They're
yeah.
they're rummaging for food all
Literally,
over the
they
place.
just don't. They can't produce enough food to feed the population.
Exactly, and I've been aware of it, but it just happenstance this afternoon I went online, and I got to the site discussing what's going on with this situation, and this doctor wrote it down. I can't remember. Dr. Atilo Rivera Vasquez. And this was updated in October, and he was telling how frustrated he is because they're not getting supplies, but he said one of the frustrations is that they're not getting the media coverage like here.
Which would bring in support, financial
Which would bring in
support.
financial
Exactly.
Right.
And I could relate to that right away. As I say, I knew that they were down there, but I wasn't that updated
Right.
because you don't.
But Project Hope is there, is it not?
That's what I
Yeah,
mean.
that's what Project.
that's-
Yeah,
yeah.
that's what you're talking about.
Yes, and I had known that
Yeah.
because I've seen something about it. But I was glad that I read this article. I mean, it was, disheartening. I mean, I was sorry to read it, but I could imagine how frustrated this doctor is trying. I mean, he described all the things that are going on, the different classes of people, and but not to have the backup and the supplies and everything that they need down there.
That's because people aren't excited and want to help. You have to get the Americans to get into it and
Yeah.
And
get
unfortunately, there is this political part of it,
Right.
if you will, that a lot of people don't want to talk about.
upset about it. Right.
And he explained, of course, the different classes in Venezuela, and one's being very educated and everything. They don't want the world to know how bad off they are.
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
because there's so much focus on socialism, if I may say that word. But
Exactly.
some of the pictures I've seen of Venezuela lately is not very impressive. It looks like in San Francisco with all the people in tents and
Yeah.
and what's happening to their streets. It looks just like that in Venezuela.
I can't
It's
imagine.
awful.
When I was down in Cartagena, now this was in '67, I wanted to take a trip over to Venezuela, and I was even then advised not to, because it
Right,
wasn't a good idea.
right. Gail, well, I just wanted to ask you, we see on TV all the time the kids with the cleft palates. Did you see that? The miracles that people perform. I forget what the group is now, Smile.
Yeah.
I forget what that group is, where you see the kids on TV and they fix them. And did you deal with that a lot?
Oh yes,
Was that?
yes, quite a bit. Another deformity. See, a lot of this, you see a lot of it in third world countries because, again, like the mothers
Nutrition, right.
don't get
Right.
proper nutrition when they're pregnant. And
Well, on this video, they had a man who was completely bow-legged. I mean, and they had a lot of people that were bow-legged, and that's bone from nutrition and milk and.
yeah,
you don't
we
have
saw
it.
so many different things like that. I mean, people they couldn't walk, and I mean.
Could you tell us the story about Edgar? Because that'll cheer everybody up.
Okay, I wanted to be sure to tell the story about Edgar. As I told you previously, a lot of the inpatients on the ship, other than surgical patients, were to treat malnutrition. Well, little Edgar was admitted. It was not too long before we were leaving. Little Edgar was, he was about 4 years old, I think. Blonde hair, blue eyes.
Not your typical Cartagenian. Right?
No,
No.
no. And if I recall correctly, his mother had other children, and she just was having difficulty taking care of them. And so anyway, we treated, in pediatrics, of
Yeah.
course, we treated Edgar.
And what was wrong with him? Nutrition? Or
Yeah, he
the
had
bloated stomach?
The bloated, and it took a while, you know, to get that turned around and everything. The other thing we knew that with so many of them that was disheartening, we would get them well, they'd leave, and it probably would recur. Well, the pediatric nurses took a real liking to Edgar, and it kind of grew throughout the ship. I mean, because we lived on the ship, and so all of us got to know Edgar. One of the pediatric nurses' sister and her husband in the United States were not able to have children. Bing, 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 bing.
Yes, really. You can tell what's coming.
And so started talking about it. So this gal, I can't think of her name right now, it doesn't matter, but she contacted her sister in the States and said, you know, would you like to adopt it? Because all of us fell in love with Edgar. We can't let him leave the ship.
Aw.
Well, anyway, they did. I can't go into all the detail because it was very convoluted and a lot of documents and between
Probably a little political, no?
Cartagena, Colombia and the United States, and we had a time frame here because we were leaving in a few weeks and so on and so forth. But it happened. But then it got to the point where Edgar was well.
Oh.
So he kind of was a stowaway on the ship.
We told a fib.
Uh-oh.
It's like we would, and all of us were part of it, you know. I guess the chief nurse knew. Some of them would have to go, you know, like this, and God forbid, oh God, what if Dr. Walsh comes to visit, you know?
Get this kid.
You
on
get
the
the
He
ship.
was
kid
a
fit him in
stowaway
the
in there
closet.
because he was taking up a patient bed.
Oh.
And there was a lot you can imagine
Yeah, right.
going on. And so they got it done, and so Edgar came
Nice.
back on the ship with us to
Nice.
Pennsylvania. And I can just close my eyes and remember when we got in, it was just before Christmas. and a helicopter loaded down a Christmas tree.
Oh.
And I've got it's on a slide because that's what I had, but a picture of Edgar.
Yeah,
like
what
this.
is that?
Why are they
Yeah,
putting this tree on the
exactly.
ship?
Decorated
It's
and
like,
lights.
what's that?
Yeah,
The kid.
how sweet.
I kept in touch with him, you know, for a while because that was a long time ago, and through his aunt,
Yeah,
who was
right.
a nurse, and yeah, there were some issues.
Well, it's completely different. I mean,
Exactly,
What a tough
exactly. And
adjustment.
you know, in thinking about this now, I would just love to.
right.
Now maybe I
Well,
can
he's
try
a
to find out.
Grown-up man now.
Yeah, but that was really something.
That's
That was,
nice. That's nice. Well, I love what they do with those children with the. I mean, some of them are just there's such a gap there. How they do
of course,
that. is
I was
amazing.
familiar with. I mean, in the States, occasionally.
Oh, and what you
It
were
would
used to
take
in
care
the,
of those situations. Of course, I had to affiliate at Boston Children's Hospital, but so I was aware of it, but not the extent
yeah,
as it was down there.
right.
But it was a lot of that type of thing, and actually, you saw the picture of the boy with the
Right.
tumor
Right.
was.
6 hours to take that off.
Yeah, well, it's
Everything's all attached, right? They have to.
nerve
Yeah.
vessels and
Yeah.
nerves and everything.
And you've got some big,
Yeah.
veins there
But
too,
see,
right?
we had a specialist for every, like we had plastic surgeons and all for different specialties.
Were you able to fly people in if there was something unexpected that happened? Oh, you didn't? You just had to work with who you had?
You can do what you got.
Yeah, really.
Well, but
Make
this
do.
is again how the specialist, you know, and they had their counterparts and everything.
Well, it was great that they were able to make the 2-month turnaround and replace all the specialties if they were able to
They
do.
were.
That was really great.
Can you think about what we're talking about? All of the global planning
Right.
that went into this project.
It sounds like a massive amount of planning.
Yes.
And that's a good segue into what do you see the future being for Project Hope? Like, where do you see them fitting into things like USAID and all the other projects out there that are giving aid to third world countries? Like, what's
with AIDS and all that stuff in some of the countries?
Yeah, and or some of the larger. Like the larger diseases that
Right.
are out there now,
Right,
like
tuberculosis.
what's the path forward for an organization like Project Hope?
Well, for the future,
Yes. Yep.
I just see it continuing and, if anything, getting
Bigger.
bigger.
Do each of these places have a place to do surgery? Or do they use I realize if they're on land, they probably use the local hospitals, which may or may not have all they need, because you were just saying about the shortage. That would
Because
be
I'm sure that they, ship in supplies
stuff.
and everything. But yes, this is why when you asked me, what my
was it good or bad?
Yeah, but they're there. I mean, helping what they can is better than nothing. It's like the other projects, like Doctors Without Borders.
Right.
They'll go for like a week or something, and boom, 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 one procedure after another, and doing what they can. I mean,
And is the Mercy ship? I saw a lot of videos on YouTube about the Mercy ship, but that's a similar thing to the SS Hope.
it's similar.
Similar.
It is similar.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
And,
there is still land and sea
Yeah.
service, which may cover it.
Is that a separate organization,
Yeah, I
though,
think
or
so.
is it part
It's
of
a separate organization,
Yeah.
completely separate. I know about it. I can't remember all the details
Yeah.
of how it was set up and everything, but I know there's somebody that I see on TV that goes there once in a while.
Oh, neat. And
Dana.
you said you saw the woman Dottie that you worked with on the ship on our video before?
Dottie
Yeah.
Eschliman, Dottie interviewed me because Dottie was the chief nurse, and she was on the first trip
Yeah.
to Indonesia, and it would have been in 1966. She was taking a leave, and she was getting her master's at Berkeley. And so they had her come down to Los Angeles to interview me.
Great.
She's just a wonderful, wonderful person.
Well, to do that.
And we had a very nice conversation. I mean, we hit it off and everything, but she was very realistic. And she said, "Gail, I would like to say, I hope you'd be able to come on board, but as I say, they only needed 2 operating room nurses for the next tour."
Wow. I have to tell you that.
So your odds are,
the videos I saw, it looked like controlled. It looked hectic but organized.
Well, that's hospitals in general.
Yeah, but I mean, this on a ship, and everybody's zipping in and out.
Well, that's part of it anyway. That's why, that's the way, like, operating room nurses.
Are they there that way?
That's how you
Not
function.
me, I'm out when they bring me in there. It's like, put me
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
But then also the doctors where I was working, because they all knew, and every day they, "Have you heard, Gail? Have you heard?" I said, "No, I'm not going. I'm not
from
going."
your hospital.
What do you mean? So then when I got the letter, I'm like, "Oh, what have I done?"
Aren't you glad
Yeah.
you went, though? What an experience. I'm surprised you didn't talk about it so much. I'd be talking about it all the time. I mean, first of all, it's an honor, I would assume, to be asked to be on that ship, because they can't have people that don't know what they're doing and can't handle the chaos, which
No,
it looks like to me.
it was, as I say, the fact that they only needed 2 operating rooms. One more thing, I know we're running out of time.
No, we have 2 minutes, so you're good.
Okay. We were leaving in December to come back to the States, and I started waking up in the middle of the night, and I couldn't, what is going on? What's wrong with me? I suddenly realized I didn't want to leave.
Huh.
I was really enjoying what I was doing.
Yeah.
And they always, at that time, they had selected one person to stay, either go or stay on like one operating room nurse.
Right.
And I knew they already had picked somebody from the States to go down. But I called a meeting with Dottie and the hospital administrator and I think the shore administrator. I just had to get it. I just had to get it out there.
Yeah.
And I said to them, I know you've already have somebody coming and so on and so forth, but I just need to let you know how I'm feeling. I just don't want to leave, And that was it. I mean, well, 6 months after we got back, I got a letter from them saying that gal was leaving. Did I want to go back to Cartagena? Well, that was one of the most difficult decisions I ever made, because there was a culture shock coming back to the United States.
Right.
Right.
I mean, when you're dealing for 10 months with people who don't have anything, basically.
Right.
And like the smallest things. One of them, this is silly, but it was Christmas time, and I went into a store, and they said, "Do you want this gift wrap for you?" And I thought, have somebody, somebody doing things for you.
Yeah.
But it was a real culture shock. And fortunately, we were all over the country. We're long-distance calls practically every day with each other. Of course, I knew the doctor, Dr. Thompson. I could talk to him. But it's hard to explain. And that's and the only people that understand are people who've done similar things.
Sure. Well, there's such a complete difference from the ship to home, and if you're there 6 months, you get into that routine.
And I had to be careful because the way surgeons tend to be a little difficult sometimes, and I had to talk to myself because I knew the first time one of the surgeons back home yelled at me because I didn't have something, I was going to feel like telling them, "You're lucky that you have anything."
Yeah, right, exactly. Gail, we've run out of time. This has been fabulous. I have enjoyed it, and I thank you very much. Thank you for your service.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Thank
it
you
was
for
really
having
great.
me.
I knew you were going to enjoy this show. We'll see you next week, and in the meantime, keep listening beyond the sound bites.